I would ask you, if you have a Bible, that you do go ahead and meet me in Matthew chapter 11. You heard it read into your hearing, but we're going to take a few minutes this morning just to look at this familiar passage in Matthew's gospel. And this is a departure, I realize, from the Abound series that you're hearing this semester, but I got the invitation to share with you a text that was on my heart that might be a departure, but I believe that it would be a truth, a word that God has for us, maybe even as we begin this week that we call Holy, looking towards Calvary and the empty tomb and what God has done for us in Christ Jesus. I don't know, are you familiar with the Barkley race? Silence. I'll take that as a no. I don't know if you've ever been tired, weary, worn out, fatigued, exhausted. There's tired and then there's Barkley tired. Now, the Barkley is a ultramarathon in Tennessee. It cost $1.60 to enter. That's the entrance fee. You can afford that. Or sometimes it's like a pack of tube socks is literally the entry fee. It's run by a rather eccentric figure, and it involves 100 miles. So you do 5 20-mile loops, and if you complete it, only 40 runners a year are accepted into the race, but they run and they run and they run, right? 100 miles, 5 20-mile loops. Now, if you only do 3 20-mile loops, that's called the fun run. So, you got to settle. But, 100 miles, and there are documentaries about the Barkley. People like eating whole pizzas as they run just because their caloric intake is so high, to run at that speed over that duration of distance. And you see them when they finish these races. Maybe some of you have done an ultramarathon, and there's nothing quite like the Barkley. One person described it as, quote, a human sacrifice. And when you watch the documentaries about it, you kind of understand why they would say that. Because there's tired, and then there's tired. There's weary, and then there's weary. And you see what this run does to someone's body, to their mind at the end of it. And I'll admit to you, I have not applied to run in it. I know, looking at me, you're shocked. I got that laugh, okay. For all of our fatigue, and I suspect maybe even at this point in the semester, with 4 weeks to go before final exams, you may feel a little fatigued. Or maybe if you're an admitted student here this morning and you're thinking about your graduation from high school, or maybe you're a transfer student and you're thinking about all that's coming and all the things that are on your plate, and you feel that weariness and that fatigue. But for all of our experience of fatigue, there is a deeper spiritual reality here in our experience, isn't there? A weariness of the soul. Because you can run and run and run and sleep well at night, but still be at rest in your soul. There is a spiritual well-being, a flourishing, a peace, a comfort, a hope that can come in any circumstance. And I believe that the passage you heard read this morning speaks to us of that invitation that Jesus gives. And you heard it in the passage. Jesus' invitational imperative is very simple. Come to me. Come to me. It's an invitation for all who would hear it, including for everyone here this morning. So I want to just ask 3 questions about Jesus' invitation and reflect on those with you this morning. And my prayer is that we would hear the voice of Jesus by his Spirit through his word, calling every heart in this room this morning to come to him afresh. So 3 questions. First off, let's think, who is invited to come? In that passage that you heard read, who does Jesus invite to come to him? Well, it's right there in the passage. He says, verse 28, all who are weary and burdened. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened. So who is that? That's all of us, every one of us. If you don't think you fit that designation, you don't know yourself. Every human being who has ever lived fits in Jesus' designation. What does he mean here when he describes this? There is a weight, a burdening, so to speak, that lies on every human heart. Because of the sin of our first parents, the fallenness of the world, and our spiritual blindness and darkness, we all labor under burdens of the soul. In Jesus' context, actually, the way Matthew tells this story, it's embedded in a broader context. Jesus will go right now into chapter 12, and he'll start describing how he is Lord of the Sabbath, and that the laws and regulations that the Pharisees have added onto God's law, those are crushing God's people under their weight. They are imposing a burden that no one can ever actually uphold. And people feel the spiritual weight and burden of that guilt and of that shame. So Jesus here is describing not just a physical fatigue or a psychological exhaustion. It is this deep weight of the soul under the crushing weight, the crushing burden of our sin and our guilt, and our attempts to try to alleviate that burden in our own strength. We all live under that weight of guilt, of sin, of shame, and we all try to deal with it in different ways. You could, in your classes or in your own study, do a survey of all of the major world religions, every spiritual movement, every new sect that emerges. Entire religions are built around what do we do with this burden? Because in every human heart, there is a testimony that says to us, we are not the way we're supposed to be. We fall short. We're guilty. And every other world religion says, clean yourself up, fix yourself, draw closer to the divine insofar as you are able to remedy your dilemma. If you can alleviate your own weight, your own burden, then perhaps you can draw nearer to the transcendent, to the divine. That's not biblical Christianity. Christianity here comes to us through Christ, inviting all who are weary and burdened to come to him. You and I can never measure up. We can't fix ourselves. I mean, if you doubt me, just for a minute, think for the culture that you and I live in right now in 2023. I would say it's, as others have described it, it's a performative culture. So the way we curate our public image on social media, the way we even in Christian spaces will often adopt a performative culture. I want to make sure that you know, for example, that I'm a really serious Christian. So I'm going to make sure that my social media post, like you're going to see my Bible open and my coffee mug, like just me, #with-Jesus. And it doesn't actually matter perhaps what's going on in my own heart in that moment, but I am performing something because I believe that the culture, the system that I'm a part of, it values this performance. And there's real data now and research that's showing us that kind of performative culture, far from enabling healthy spirituality, far from fostering health in our souls, it actually is crushing us and killing us. Lower levels of fulfillment, lower levels of happiness. We're not more spiritually energized or refreshed in our walk with Christ. We are killing ourselves in this performative spiritual culture. We are trying to lift up the weight in our own strength. Jesus says, come to me. Come to me. And here's the good news. Jesus invites all to come. All to come. He doesn't here give a qualified invitation. This is not just for some of one gender or one race or ethnicity or socioeconomic status or nationality, tax bracket. All are invited to come to the one who lifts that weight. All are invited to come to Christ Jesus. So that's who. How do we come? Second question, how do we come to Jesus in this way? Well, look at what he says. Come to me. I don't want to trip over that. It's not lost on me that Jesus here does not say, come to my teaching, come to my commandments, because he has those. He doesn't even say, come to my kingdom. And Jesus talks a lot about his kingdom. No, what does Jesus say? Come to me. Oh, I hope you hear this morning. I wish I could impress upon you the life-transforming reality of these simple words. Jesus here says, only a personal encounter with me will do. Only knowing Jesus personally, experientially, intimately. Only that will do. We come to a person, a real, living person. There's a lot of talk about coming to Jesus. In fact, we even say that sometimes, don't we? Like, we need to have a come to Jesus meeting. Have you ever had that said to you? If not, get ready. But what do we mean? We hear people talking about praying a prayer, walking an aisle, or claiming Jesus' name in faith for something that we want, like he's an ATM machine. But no, that's not what he's describing here. We come to Jesus. And when we come, how do we come? Look at what he says. Take up my yoke and learn from me. We come to Jesus by exchanging one burden with another. So he says, if you're burdened and weary, what do? You come to me and you take Jesus' yoke on you. You let aside one burden to take on a different one. It seems counterintuitive. What's he saying here? Now, maybe you know this if you grew up in some sort of culture or context where beasts of burden were familiar to you and you know what a yoke looks like on an ox or another animal. But it was essentially an instrument used to harness the power of a beast of burden to plow a field or to do some sort of labor on a farm. It's to control and direct. So if you hear that, you actually go, well, that doesn't sound liberating, Jesus. It sounds like a restriction of my freedom. You want to put a yoke on me? What kind of invitation is that? It flies contrary to everything that our culture tells us about freedom and autonomy. But Jesus actually says, if you're weary and burdened, come to me, take my yoke upon you, and learn from me. This is an invitation to discipleship. An invitation to hand over control of our lives to King Jesus. And the reality is that true freedom comes from living under Jesus' rule. That's the upside down equation of the kingdom of Christ. Freedom comes from living under his lordship. He wants every part of your life, every inch of it. There is no part of your life that Jesus finds uninteresting or too distant from his lordship. He wants all of it. And the reality too is, Jesus is not impressed by your religious performance. He's not impressed by your GPA. I'll even go so far as to say he's not impressed by how many chapels you've gone to this semester or how often you lifted your hands in worship at the missions conference. What does he look at? He looks at your heart. He looks at how you have yielded your life to his authority and his lordship. And he wants all of it. Now that sounds daunting perhaps when we answer the who and the how questions. But if we leave out the third and final question, we'll miss the whole thing entirely. What do we find when we come to Jesus? What do we find when we come to Jesus? And I'm so glad Jesus says it this way. We find one who is lowly and humble in heart. It would be one thing if Jesus invited all of us to come and find rest in him by taking on his yoke. You might be a little leery, though. You might be cautious about receiving that invitation and taking him at his word if you did not know what kind of person he is. If you don't know his heart, you will be leery of his invitation. But when I hear, I am gentle, humble, lowly in heart, doesn't that stir up something in you? It says to you and to me this morning, just as it has said to the church for 2 millennia, you can trust this king. He is not like the other rulers of the world. He does not use his power for his own selfish appetites. He is not manipulative. He is not authoritarian or domineering. He is self-sacrificing. He's gracious and humble and gentle and kind. He is not like any other leader you've ever met. I would be a fool, in other words, not to surrender my life to this one. if he is as good as he says he is, and yes, I'm here to tell you by his word and spirit, he is as good as he says he is, you can trust him with every part of your life. You can take his yoke upon you and find joy in that. Now here's the irony of it. In the ancient world, and you probably know this because you're Biola students, and you've taken your 30 hours of Bible. In the ancient world, meekness, lowliness, humility, those were seen as signs of weakness, not strength. Masters and kings and lords, they weren't known for their lowliness. Jesus, though, is entirely different. The risen Christ still comes to us in humility. Think of just his own life. Born in a manger, not in a palace. Raised in Nazareth, not in a cosmopolitan center of cultural influence or prestige. An itinerant homeless rabbi who traveled around Galilee with a ragtag group of disciples, some with criminal records, questionable mental health pedigrees, and all other sorts of sordid pasts. These are the followers that Jesus calls to himself. He's gentle and lowly. Indicted and charged in a fraudulent case, taken before the legal authorities, unjustly executed, treated even worse than a common criminal. He's gentle and lowly. Jesus here puts his heart on display, compelling us to trust him, to come to him. And the promise is infinitely wonderful. It's right there in the text. I will give you rest. Because take up my yoke, then he says, and learn from me, because I am lowly and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden light. Here's the thing, Jesus doesn't make lesser demands on us. You might be tempted to think, well, the law, the Pharisees, those were horribly crushing demands. And you might then be tempted to think, so Jesus lowers the bar? Let me just remind you, this is the same Jesus who would say things like, you have heard it said, thou shalt not murder, but I say unto you, if you are angry at your brother, you've already sinned against him. The cost of discipleship, of following Jesus, is actually higher than the Pharisees could imagine. Because the cost of following Jesus involves not just taking up his yoke of discipleship, but being crucified with him, being united with him in his death and burial. Jesus, in other words, is saying, you don't give me just a portion of your life. You don't figure out how to kind of dissect the law so that you can kind of have your cake and eat it too, and you get to claim your autonomy, but also kind of have some religious celebration or participation. No, he says, you actually have to die with me and be raised with me and be glorified with me. That's the only way to life and to freedom. But his yoke is easy. And his yoke is light. Why? Because he calls us to himself. And in him we find our Sabbath rest. He is our Sabbath rest. It's the only way, this is the only way to know rest for your soul. And every human heart is restless until it finds its rest in Jesus. No exceptions, no caveats. Maybe this morning, there are those of you who feel that restlessness, that weariness of the heart. And Jesus is saying to you, as clearly as ever, by his word, come to me. It may be that you are here this morning, and you've been at Biola for some time, in fact, and you know what it looks like to put on a religious performance. You know what it looks like to try to do all the right things that a student at Biola should do. But if you and I were honest with one another this morning, you know that right now you are exhausted. You are so tired of trying to put on that performance. Because what has to happen is actually something in the heart that only Jesus can accomplish by his Spirit. And Jesus is saying to you this morning, come to me. I am gentle and lowly. Find your rest in me. Lay down your religious performance and follow me. Perhaps to others of you, you're walking with Jesus. You love Jesus. You hear his invitation here and you go, I want even more of him. I want to go closer with him. But even there, as Christians, we feel that, don't we? We struggle with sin, anxiety, broken relationships, disappointment, all sorts of things that weary our hearts. So the call to come to Jesus in this way isn't a one-time invitation. It is the daily exercise of the Christian life as we pick up our cross and follow him. And to you, my dear sister or brother, this morning Jesus is calling you and me, come to me. Come to Jesus. Find rest in him. Rest for your conscience. Rest for your mind. Rest for your anxieties. Rest for your fears and troubles. Rest, the kind of rest that the world cannot even begin to comprehend. This is not self-care. Nothing against self-care, but biblical Christianity is not about self-care. Although you should be good stewards of all that God's entrusted to you and take care of yourself, not getting into that, just saying Jesus is talking here about something far higher and holier than anything about self-care can ever begin to describe. This is not self-care, this is Jesus care. This is entrust yourself to the one who is infinitely good, infinitely gracious, infinitely holy, infinitely wonderful, infinitely humble. He is for you and loves you. So how will you respond this morning? What does it look like for you, even on this Monday of Holy Week, to hear Jesus' words of invitation afresh? What might he be doing in your heart this morning as he calls to you, come to me?
Discover who you're called to be at Biola University, a leading Christ-centered university in Los Angeles, with programs on campus and online. Subscribe for more of our videos and learn more at biola.edu.